Imagine a place where time stops and only speed exists. Imagine a ribbon of asphalt 8.5 miles long, winding through the French countryside. To the locals, it is just a public road. But once a year, in June, it becomes a battlefield. It becomes a graveyard. It becomes Le Mans. For 24 hours, machines are tortured. Drivers are pushed to the brink of madness. Brakes glow like molten lava in the night. Engines scream at 7,000 RPM until they either conquer the distance or explode in a cloud of smoke and oil. To win Le Mans is to achieve immortality. And in the early 1960s, Le Mans belonged to one man. One name, one color, red Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari was the pope of this religion. His cars were elegant, fragile, sophisticated, and unbeatable. From 1960 to 1965, a Ferrari stood on the top step of the podium every single year. They were the gods of speed. But in 1966, a storm arrived from the West. A storm made of American steel, unlimited dollars, and a burning desire for revenge. This is the story of how a company that made boring family sedans decided to kill a god. This is the story of the Ford GT40. To understand the war, we must understand the generals. On one side of the Atlantic in Detroit, Michigan, sat Henry Ford II. They called him the Deuce. He was the grandson of the legendary Henry Ford. He was a man of immense power, ruling over the Ford Motor Company like a king. He was loud, he was heavy-handed, and he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. His factories churned out millions of cars a year. He measured success in tons of steel and billions of dollars. On the other side, in Maranello, Italy, sat Enzo Ferrari, Il Commendatore. He was a ghost, a man who rarely left his factory, who wore dark sunglasses indoors to hide his emotions. He didn't care about selling cars. He only sold road cars to fund his true passion, racing. To Enzo, the customer was just a necessary annoyance. In 1963, these two worlds collided. Ford wanted a new image. The Deuce wanted to appeal to the younger generation. The baby boomers were coming of age, and they didn't want the boring cars their parents drove. They wanted speed, they wanted sex appeal. Ford executives pitched an idea: total performance. Win on Sunday, sell on Monday. But Ford had no sports cars. Building a racing program from scratch would take years, so they decided to buy one instead. They looked at Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari was in financial trouble. Racing was expensive. He needed a partner. Negotiations began quietly. Ford sent a team of lawyers and executives to Italy. They audited the books. They valued the assets. After months of talks, a deal was struck. Ford would buy Ferrari for $10 million. It was a fair price. The contracts were drawn up. The pens were ready. But there was a clause, a subtle clause in the contract regarding the racing division, Scuderia Ferrari. The clause stated that Ford in Detroit would have the final say on the budget and decisions for the racing team. Enzo Ferrari read the clause. He stopped. He looked at the Ford executives. His face turned purple. For Enzo, racing was his life. It was his soul. Giving control of the racing team to a bunch of accountants in Detroit was unthinkable. He grabbed a pen and wrote no across the contract in purple ink. Then he unleashed a tirade of insults that would change history. He looked at the Ford executive, Don Frey, and said, "My cars are art. Your cars are ugly factories on wheels." And then the final blow. He insulted the boss. You go back and tell Henry Ford II that he is not Henry Ford. He is just Henry Ford II. He walked out. The deal was dead. When Don Frey returned to Detroit, he was terrified. He walked into Henry Ford II's office and delivered the bad news. He told him about the failed deal. He told him about the insults. The Deuce sat silently. He wasn't used to being told no, and he certainly wasn't used to being called inferior to his grandfather. His face hardened. The atmosphere in the room dropped 10 degrees. He looked at Don Frey and gave a simple order. Go to Europe, find the best engineers, build me a car that will crush Ferrari at Le Mans. Frey asked, "What is the budget, sir?" Henry Ford II looked him in the eye. "There is no budget. You spend whatever it takes. I want that red car humiliated." The war had begun. Ford didn't start from zero. They partnered with Eric Broadley of Lola Cars in England, who had a promising chassis called the Lola MK6. Ford set up a new division, Ford Advanced Vehicles, in Slough, England. They worked at a frantic pace. They had less than a year to build a car for the 1964 season. The result was the Ford GT. It was a monster. It stood only 40 inches tall. That's why it was later nicknamed the GT40. It was sleek, low, and incredibly aerodynamic. But fitting a massive American V8 engine into a delicate European chassis was like trying to teach a grizzly bear to dance ballet. The first tests were a disaster. The car was fast, terrifyingly fast, but it was unstable. At 170 miles per hour, the front end would lift off the ground. The steering would go light. The drivers were terrified. The gearbox, unrelated to the heavy torque of the V8, would explode. The brakes would boil after a few laps, but they pressed on. They took the cars to Le Mans in 1964. It was a humiliation. 3 Ford GT40S started the race. None of them finished. They broke down. They caught fire. Meanwhile, Ferrari cruised to another easy victory. The Italians laughed. The European press mocked the Yankee tanks. Henry Ford II was not laughing. He had spent millions, and all he had to show for it was a pile of smoking scrap metal in France. He realized that his corporate executives in suits didn't know how to win races. He needed a racer. He needed a cowboy. He needed Carroll Shelby. Carroll Shelby was a legend. A Texan chicken farmer who had won Le Mans in 1959, driving an Aston Martin with a heart condition that required him to pop nitroglycerin pills under his tongue while driving. He had already put a Ford engine into a British chassis to create the Cobra. He knew how to marry American power with European handling. Ford handed the GT40 project to Shelby. Shelby walked into the workshop. He looked at the cars. They were filthy. They were unorganized. This, Shelby said, is a mess. But Shelby had a secret weapon. A man who understood cars better than anyone else on earth. A man who could listen to an engine and tell you which bolt was loose. Ken Miles. Ken Miles was difficult. He was a World War II tank commander. He was British, living in Los Angeles. He was sarcastic, grumpy, and he didn't suffer fools. He famously threw wrenches at executives he didn't like. The Ford suits hated him. They called him Teddy Teabag. They thought he was a beatnik, a loose cannon. But Carroll Shelby knew the truth. Ken Miles was a driving genius. Shelby brought Miles into the program. Ken, he said, I need you to fix this pig. Miles got into the GT40. He drove it. He came back to the pits. It's bloody awful, Miles said, but it has potential. For the next year, Miles lived in that car. They solved the aerodynamics. They used strips of wool taped to the car to see the airflow. They discovered the nose was creating lift, so they redesigned the bodywork. They solved the engine. They swapped the smaller engine for a massive 7.0 liter, 427 cubic inch V8 from the NASCAR stock cars. It was heavy, but it was bulletproof. It produced 485 horsepower and enough torque to restart a dead planet. But the biggest problem was the brakes. A 3,000-pound car doing 210 miles per hour in the Mulsanne Strait generates incredible heat when it tries to stop. The brake rotors would heat up to 1,500 degrees. They would glow cherry red, then crack and fail. Ferrari used sophisticated ceramic composite brakes. Ford didn't have that technology. So, a Ford engineer named Phil Remington came up with a brilliant, simple American solution. If the brakes are going to break, let's make them easy to change. He designed a system where the entire brake rotor and caliper could be swapped out during a pit stop in less than a minute. It was unheard of. Nobody changed brakes during a race, but it worked. They were ready for Le Mans 1965, or so they thought. The 1965 race was another disaster. The new Mark II cars were fast, but they were rushed. The gearboxes failed. The engines overheated. Once again, all the Fords retired. Once again, Ferrari won. This was the breaking point. Henry Ford II sent a memo to the racing division. It was a small card. It read simply, "You better win." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat. For 1966, Ford went nuclear. They didn't just bring a team, they brought an army. They brought 20 tons of spare parts. They brought chefs. They brought mobile workshops. They brought 8 GT40S. And leading the charge was Ken Miles. Miles was 47 years old. By racing standards, he was ancient. Ford executives wanted to fire him. They wanted young, handsome American poster boys, but Shelby fought for him. If Ken doesn't drive, Shelby told Ford, I don't race. Ford relented. Miles would drive. The day of the race. The atmosphere was electric. 300,000 spectators gathered. On the grid sat the Titans, the Ferrari 330P3S. Beautiful, curvaceous, weighing only 1,900 pounds, driven by the best European drivers, and the Ford GT40 MK2s, brutal, low, wide, aggressive. Henry Ford II was there. He was given the honor of dropping the French flag to start the race. As the flag dropped, the ground shook. The roar of the big American V8s drowned out the high-pitched scream of the Ferrari V12s. But the start was messy. Ken Miles, in the number 1 car, had a loose door. He had to pit on the first lap. He fell to last place. Ferrari took the lead. The Italian mechanics smirked. The Americans are falling apart already. But they didn't know Ken Miles. Miles drove like a man possessed. He hammered the lap record, lap after lap. He reeled them in. By nightfall, the rain began to fall. Le Mans at night in the rain is a death trap. At 200 miles per hour, you can't see the track. You drive by instinct. While the other drivers slowed down, Ken Miles went faster. He danced the heavy Ford through the corners. He was in a trance. As the night wore on, the stress began to show. The Ferraris were fast, but they were fragile. They were being pushed too hard by the relentless pace of the Fords. One by one, the Ferraris began to fail. Overheating, gearbox failures, accidents. By the early morning hours of Sunday, the impossible had happened. Every single factory Ferrari P3 had retired. The red cars were dead. Ford was running 1, 2, 3. Ken Miles was in the lead. He was laps ahead of the competition. He had driven the race of his life. He was about to achieve the triple crown of endurance racing, Daytona, Sebring, and Le Mans, in a single year, a feat no driver had ever accomplished. He was exhausted. His face was covered in oil and brake dust, but he was smiling. He had done it. He had proven the suits wrong. Leo Beebe, the Ford executive in charge of the racing program, looked at the timing screens. Ford cars were in first, second, and third place. Beebe began to worry. What if the cars started racing each other? What if they crashed? It would be a PR disaster. He had an idea, a marketing idea. He wanted a photo finish. He wanted the 3 Fords to cross the finish line together, side by side. It would be the ultimate picture for the Monday morning newspapers, the ultimate humiliation of Ferrari. He radioed Carroll Shelby. Tell Miles to slow down. Let the other Fords catch up. Shelby was furious. He knew that Miles was laps ahead. He knew Miles deserved the win. Shelby walked to the pit wall. He called Miles in. Ken, Shelby said, looking at his boots. They want you to slow down. They want a photo finish. Ken Miles looked at Shelby. The betrayal in his eyes was heartbreaking. So, I don't win? Miles asked. You're way ahead, Shelby said. But Leo Beebe is running the show. Miles exploded. I worked my ass off for this car, and now they want a photo op? He got back in the car. For a moment, he thought about disobeying. He thought about pushing the throttle to the floor and leaving everyone in the dust. But Ken Miles was a company man. He respected Shelby. He lifted his foot off the gas. He slowed down. He watched his lead evaporate. The number 2 car, driven by Bruce McLaren, caught up. The number 5 car caught up. 4 p.m. Sunday. 3 Ford GT40S appeared on the final straight. They were side by side, engines rumbling in unison. It was a beautiful sight. They crossed the line together. Henry Ford II cheered. The executives popped champagne. It was the greatest victory in American racing history. But as the cars pulled into the winner's circle, confusion spread. The French officials from the ACO, Automobile Club de l'Ouest, came forward. They pointed out a rule, a technicality. Because the cars finished in a dead heat, The winner was the car that had covered the greatest distance. Bruce McLaren's car, number 2, had started 20 yards further back on the grid than Ken Miles's car, number 1. Therefore, by crossing the line together, Bruce McLaren had actually traveled 20 yards further than Ken Miles. Bruce McLaren was declared the winner. Ken Miles was second. Leo Beebe knew the rule? Maybe. Did he care? No. He got his photo. Ken Miles stood there. He watched Bruce McLaren spraying the champagne. He watched the executives celebrating. He had been robbed, not by Ferrari, not by a mechanical failure, but by his own team, by a marketing stunt. He looked at Carroll Shelby. Shelby looked like he wanted to cry. "I'm sorry, Ken," Shelby said. Miles shrugged. "It's just a race, Carroll. It's just a race." He walked away from the podium. He never complained to the press. He went back to work. 2 months later, August 1966, Riverside Raceway in the California desert. Ken Miles was testing the next generation of the Ford race car, the J car. He was doing what he loved, driving at the limit. At the end of the back straight, something happened. A mechanical failure. The car locked up at 200 miles per hour. It flipped. It cartwheeled into the dirt. It disintegrated. Ken Miles was killed instantly. He never got his trophy. He never got the credit he deserved in his lifetime. But history has a way of correcting itself. Ford went on to win Le Mans in 1967, 1968, and 1969. They destroyed Ferrari's dominance so completely that Ferrari never won Le Mans overall again. But the 1966 victory, the giant killing, that belongs to one man. When you look at that famous photo of the 3 Fords crossing the line, don't look at the cars. Look at the blue car in the lead. Look at the helmet inside. That's Ken Miles, the man who slowed down, the man who gave everything. The giant killer wasn't just the car. It was the mechanic who taught the car how to win. Ken Miles or Bruce McLaren? Who was the real winner in your eyes? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more tragic legends of motorsport, subscribe to the channel. Drive safe.